Let's get ready for Dumbo!
Twice. They do it twice.
Let's get ready for Dumbo!
In the last couple of decades, there's been this trend of family films being self-aware and trope-savvy, as if to say, yes, parents in the room, we know that you have to endure this, but we also know that you are, in fact, smarter than your 5-year-old. You did it. And while this has been present in Disney films since, debatably, Aladdin, this kind of meta-commentary has slowly been shifting from the occasional throwaway gag,
"It's a small world after all."
No, anything but that.
to full-on important thematic statement. Enchanted is the real milestone here, and also represented a turning point for the studio in general. The entire premise of the film positing what would actually happen if a Disney princess were magically transported into the real world.
She's yours.
Don't sit. It's okay. You know, let's just walk.
See, Patrick Dempsey's trying to get his daughter into, like, Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
A book?
He wants her to be a strong, independent woman. But then, hey, a literal Disney princess brings magic into their lives. So, hey, I guess the truth is somewhere in the middle. You can be a strong, independent woman who also buys Disney princess merch.
And today, we're going to be checking out some new toys in honor of Princess Jasmine.
It wasn't obvious at the time, but this was laying the groundwork for a much broader trend of Disney acknowledging that times have changed from the era of princesses being saved by princes, and it's cool that you want to go to law school, strong, independent woman, but please don't stop buying our stuff. Audiences really liked this meta aspect of Enchanted, and we saw similar elements in other films like Frozen.
You got engaged to someone you just met that day?
Yeah, anyway.
Moana.
If you wear a dress and you have an animal sidekick, you're a princess.
And more recently, Wreck-It Ralph. Ralph breaks the internet.
Were you poisoned? No. Cursed? No. Kidnapped or enslaved? No. Are you guys okay? Should I call the police?
Soon we entered the era of the live-action remake slash sequel slash spin-off, beginning debatably with Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland, starring girl-interrupted Alice, what wears armor, and a tortured, tragic Mad Hatter, and whatever this is. As far as this trend goes, Cinderella felt like a test run. It had no real interest in reinventing the wheel so much as it slides in on the whole knowing the prince before the ball slash riding a horse equals empowerment shtick that Ever After did better, because by this point that was old hat. But on the flip side of the coin we have Maleficent, or as I like to call it, my trash.
Well.
Maleficent is a remake, sort of, which works as meta-commentary by suggesting that the villain wasn't one-dimensional, but had sympathetic motivations. Very sympathetic motivations. Motivations which I think that only Angelina Jolie knew what she was doing. I mean, I get it, girl. But really, the difference now, even from a movie as relatively recent as Maleficent, is that these films are not so much using commentary as a means to examine their past in the films that they are based on, as much as they are using meta-commentary to justify their own existence.
Teaching another girl to read isn't one enough.
Get it? The original movie wasn't empowering. But now it is. The tendency to self-correct the outdated or questionable morality of the source material is all over the place in these remakes. Dumbo, in particular, is rife with it.
Look at the sign! Dumbo!
See, in the original film, Dumbo accidentally gets lit on some champagne and hallucinates.
You see what I see?
But here...
Champagne for Dumbo! No booze near the baby.
No, we couldn't allow underage elephants to drink. What would the children think? And we're the original Dumbo reunited with his mother at the end of the movie, who seems to be enjoying retirement on her own train car. The remake has them return to the jungle. And Danny DeVito gets an epilogue where he explains to the viewer that the circus is now cruelty-free.
We believe no wild animals shall be held in captivity.
So the remake has this forced Aesop that animal cruelty is bad, you know, which is not a bad thing in and of itself. It is bad, and I'm glad animals in circuses have been phased out, but that Dumbo happens in the late 1910s and that this is how the film ends feels a little disingenuous. Like, audiences know it was a different time. I don't think anyone wanted or expected a Dumbo remake to have a message about how it's probably kind of unethical to have circus animals.
Here, I make a funny, you're ugly baby.
So instead of addressing actual criticisms that people have had of Dumbo, and we'll get to that, it seems that the film is presenting itself as thoughtful by fixing a moral outrage that, well, no one but PETA really had. So some of this strategy is built either around blatantly ignoring said dated material and cutesily joking it away, but in the interest of pretending that Disney is at least somewhat more hip to the criticism that it faces as a powerful conglomerate, it has latched onto addressing other critiques with that thing that the kids like nowadays, the wokeness.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What? Because these movies need a reason to exist, right? So it's that thing you like already, but woke. I've done a whole 35-minute video on this topic, so I will be brief in my beating of this very dead horse and very girl boss horse. But the 2017 Beauty and the Beast remake is what I see as the turning point from meta-commentary as a fun way of re-examining Disney canon to woke meta-commentary as justifying the film's existing at all.
Yes, the poor thing is probably in there scared to death.
Exactly.
This is where the movies stop trying to expand and instead want to be more like, yeah, we've read the YMMV/head scratchers page on TV tropes, so let's nitpick our own movies.
What's your name?
That is a hairbrush.
She doesn't have Stockholm Syndrome. She basically says so.
You've taken me as your prisoner and now you want to have dinner with me?
The Beast negs her and she rolls her eyes at him.
Actually, Romeo and Juliet's my favorite play.
Why is that not a surprise?
She tries to escape. See? What a girl boss. She's an inventor who reads. Girl boss. Their utter lack of chemistry is, I don't know, feminist somehow. Inasmuch as the 1991 Beauty and the Beast was a success for the studio, it also became an easy target for bad faith or lazy criticisms. It feels like an exercise of self-flagellation, but one that the audience is in on. Since Disney Studios' brand is so tied up in the idea of princesses, it's been constantly reevaluating its relationship to the concept. We definitely saw some evolution in the 90s.
Then maybe I don't want to be a princess anymore.
But in the wake of Lean In, it's like we can't have a female character without really overt text about how empowered she is. All I know is I won't go speechless. In Dumbo, there was a girl child, Colin Farrell's daughter, who wants to be a scientist.
Toys.
They're not toys. They're from my science experiments.
Not a circus performer like her father once, which, fine.
I want to be noticed for my mind.
Except it plays into the plot not at all. Like, she doesn't discover anything about Dumbo or like figure out the aerodynamics of elephants flying. It serves no other purpose other than to show that like she's not like other girls, what with their frippery and need for attention.
Maybe I don't need the world staring at me.
This girl is like 2 lines away from pulling a Neil deGrasse Tyson and asking her dad if he knows how many people die in elephant-related accidents compared to the Spanish flu. And in The Lion King, not only is Nala's part expanded, but Shinzi is a girl boss now, you know, but sinister.
Now this is a meal I've waited my whole life for. I've been waiting too, and I'm not a cub anymore.
This is my song. Which means they listened to the feminist critique of the original or something? It wasn't a critique that any actual human person had, but okay, let's pretend there was this big groundswell of mad feminists who were like, yeah, Shinzi should have been a girl boss, and Disney was like, yeah, we hear you.
There's only one true thing you ever said, Scar. The hyena's belly is never full.
So they added that, but changed nothing else, nor does the film change any of the elements that people actually did take issue with, so thanks. Aladdin likewise features new empowered girl boss Jasmine.
I was born to do more than marry some useless prince.
Jasmine in this version doesn't only want to marry for love, which to her seems kind of a secondary concern, if that. She wants to be the Sultan.
I have been preparing for this my whole life.
She quite literally aspires to be a girl boss.
You
shall be the next sultan.
See, the monarchy isn't bad, it's progressive. It just needs a female CEO. Also, Jasmine, one of the most iconic, dynamic, and beloved princesses, gets her own power ballad about how she's not speechless and you're gonna listen to her. Even though that was never an issue for that character in the original.
How dare you? All of you, standing around deciding my future? I am not a prize to be won.
And also isn't really an issue in this movie either. She doesn't really self-censor, she's not shy about her needs or stating them. Also, there's something just kind of hilarious about a character power ballading to the gods about being speechless and then immediately being taken prisoner and needing to be rescued. Whoop. So the goal here is to make princesses feel still relevant, and they do that in the way that's effectively, you know, we need more female CEOs.
The people, they make it beautiful. And they deserve a leader who knows that.
And with that in mind, I really can't wait to see how they're gonna wokeify the Little Mermaid. Like, it'll have Ariel really lean into that, like, bright young women ready to stand line and have her wanna be on land because she found a shipwrecked copy of Girl Wash Your Face. And they're gonna go way out of their way to say it's not for a guy. It's not for a guy. He's a fringe benefit. So the metatextual inclusion of gender-related progress gets addressed by adding lean-in feminism and making everyone a girl boss. But how do these new live-action movies address critique of race in older Disney films? That's certainly a hot topic. Well, here is a Washington Post article that asked that very question about Dumbo. How do they deal with it? They don't. Despite being more than happy to address gender-related criticisms in the metatext by just adding a coat of girl boss paint, race-related issues go completely ignored. Take, for instance, The Lion King, a story about how divine right birthright monarchy is not only good, but divine by nature, and also about how segregation is probably best for everybody. Now, these themes are there in the original, but given that the original elevates itself into this magical, emotional realm, it just reads differently than the remake, which is run through this hyper-realism sterilization filter. So while Lion King 2019 does a little bit of the girl boss thing, it also kind of doubles down on the whole race mixing is bad thing. It can't just be this obscure nature is mad at the disruption of the natural order as it was in the original. The text has to explain why the hyenas are bad for the Pride Lands. It has to justify why they are naturally worse than lions.
The lions will eat after the hyenas, and they don't leave much behind.
But to me, the sidestepping of race issues is nowhere more evident than in Dumbo. The original Dumbo was kind of beautiful in how flawed it was, including the elements that are abrasive to modern sensibilities.
Oh, pink elephant!
Which happened, and are a part of Disney history, and we're not doing ourselves any favors by pretending that they did not. Take, for instance, the scene of baby Dumbo accidentally getting lit, which, yes, we need to lampshade.
Champagne for Dumbo! No booze near the baby.
Now, the pink elephant sequence, which is one of the best sequences from early Disney because it's just so unapologetic and creepy and, you know, good, does get referenced in the remake. Okay.
Pink elephants. So?
Sure. Dumbo is also arguably the most, let's be charitable and call it racially insensitive of the feature canon. The Song of the Roustabout shows these guys pitching a circus tent, and has lyrics like this. We work all day, we work all night, we never learn to read or write. Grab that rope, Harry! So that's completely ignored in the remake. More infamous, and perhaps the most glaring an omission, are the crows Dumbo befriends towards the end of the film.
We done seen the light. You boys is okay.
The crows employ some pretty egregious stereotyping, singing a song written by white songwriters.
But I be done seen about everything when I see an elephant fly.
The crows voiced largely, if not entirely, by white actors, featuring a lead crow named by the animation department Jim Crow.
What's cooking around here? What's the good news? What's frying, boy?
And it took us a while to figure out whether this was apocryphal or not, because Dumbo is like the least chronicled of all of the Disney movies, and there basically are no production notes, and what few there are don't actually mention it, but turns out, yep, That was a thing. And I know there is discourse on how to handle history like this, but pretending that it just didn't exist, just ignoring it altogether and pretending it didn't happen, how is that helping make the world better or educate people?
When I see an elephant
The crows are a part of the DNA of Dumbo just as much as Baby Mine or Pink Elephants, but unlike those two, which are ham-fistedly jammed into the remake, the crows don't even get mentioned. The song isn't there, save a few words, which strikes me as noteworthy since the song itself is pretty tame.
You've seen a horse fly. You've seen a dragonfly.
Well, I seen a horse fly. I seen a dragonfly. I seen a house fly.
You've even seen a housefly.
But the crows aren't referenced, and even Dumbo's feather, which was gifted to him by the crows in the original,
Use the magic feather. Catch on? The magic feather? Yeah.
has somehow also managed to turn white. It's like there was never racism here in this universe, and there never will be. We just kind of live in this nice multicultiverse where other forms of bigotry exist and are not the ones we live with in the real world, but, you know.
What'd you do to that thing? That ain't a real elephant, those ears are fake!
We have our cutesy analogs sometimes.
I said, sit down!
If the films acknowledge racism at all, it's never systemic, but the product of a few bad apples, i.e. The Princess and the Frog.
Which is why a little woman of your background would have had her hands full.
And not the system itself. Systemic racism doesn't exist in the metaverse. If it does, again, Princess and the Frog, it can be handled with basically the ideological equivalent of a good guy with a gun. John Goodman just needs to realize that the woman who makes his favorite beignets needs more money.
This is it. I'm getting my restaurant.
See, he's a nice guy. There are good rich whites. It seems like meaningfully addressing any of these societal problems in the text of their films would mean that Disney would have to really acknowledge its own past. Which, well, that's not really why these films have meta-commentary now, is it? They aren't woke to make the world better. They're woke for you to buy stuff.
Next, we have the singing Jasmine doll from Hasbro, inspired by the Disney's Aladdin movie. Jasmine is smart, she's funny, she's brave.
It's a whole new world to lean into. See, there's no like girl wash your face lean in feminism that Disney can make marketable where race is concerned. So where they can overcorrect the princesses and make them more marketable by turning them into girl bosses, ain't much they can do to correct critique of race in Disney movies that's, you know, corporate approved, so they just ignore it. But one of the more nefarious of these joking about the sins of the father aspects of these remakes comes at the expense of the Walt Disney Company itself and its business model. Dumbo really leans into this. The plot of the original Dumbo comprises basically the first act of the 2019 remake, and from there goes into what appears to be a winking meta-critique of Disney itself.
Join me in my family. Let me take us all into the future. Let me take us all to Dreamland.
With really obvious and heavy-handed references to Disneyland in its theme park, owned by Michael Keaton's villain, Vandermeer. Himself a weird mixture of P.T. Barnum, Walt Disney, and Vanderbilt. There are blatant nods to actual attractions like the Astro Orbiter and the Carousel of Progress and just park aesthetic in general. There's a Wonder of Science attraction that, well...
Dad, Wonders of Science.
Don't worry, honey, it's bought by ExxonMobil. Also within this is a weird half-assed critique of the overuse of the word dream, and the need to feel like a child again.
You've made me a child again.
I'm still parsing out what the intention of this weird take on Disney's own past and corporate culture is meant to say, besides a weird, well, you can't hate their corporate monopoly if they make fun of themselves. Self-awareness is relatable. It feels like commentary, but it's commentary that does not say anything. Vandermeer's park looks like Disneyland, but beyond that it seems to be an indictment of P.T. Barnum more than anything, especially since the film ends with Dumbo going back to the jungle and woke circus getting rid of all their animal acts. Mary Poppins Returns also has a curious relationship to wealth and power. Jane has grown up to be a union organizer.
No, it's the Society for the Protection of the Rights of the Underpaid Citizens of England.
A labor organizer.
which, considering Walt's relationship to unions itself, is kind of hilarious. But she is mostly portrayed as kind of a ditz, and the ending relies on her asking the lamplighters for unpaid labor, not for the benefit of any kind of, labor union, but to help her save her house that she owns. Jane's advocacy doesn't really do anything for organized labor. If anything, it's just more, just ripping off the original, Well, her mom was a suffragette, so Jane's a pinko, I guess. But the main plot surrounds the banks, and also the bank, which wants to repossess the bank's house. In the original, the bank is portrayed as something of a neutral evil, heartless and bottom-line obsessed, something that Mr. Banks overvalues at the expense of his family. Meanwhile, in sequel land, the main villain is a rogue Colin Firth, the bad Richmond.
In 2 days, Banks will be out on that street, and the house will be ours.
The Banks family is on the cusp of losing their house because Michael is bad at money and Jane is a communist. A home they love so much they've tied their identity to it in much the same way that Mr. Banks did his job in the original. Towards the end, it looks like they're going to lose their house, unless they do the thing by the stroke of midnight, but don't worry. The one bad man is removed, they are able to keep their house because the bank itself is good and moral and is on the side of the middle class, and thus,
the house is yours.
The bank's identity and happiness can continue to be tied to their possession of material things. And I find that interesting because in the original, Mr. Banks lets go of the thing that he had erroneously attached his own value and sense of identity to. But in the remake, don't worry, they never have to have that moment of self-reevaluation because they never lose the thing they were worried about losing, because good capitalist is here to save the day. And he's played by Dick Van Dyke. Dick Van Dyke is over here like, oh, the bank would never intentionally hurt their trusting customers.
Nearly doubled the profits of this bank.
Yes, by wringing it out of the customer's pockets.
A large business always has the best intentions. Big corporations aren't bad, but the rare nefarious individual, that is the bad one. It is not the system that is bad, but a few bad apples. If anything, the transition from old Disney to new Disney is a transition from monarchy is good to capitalism is good. There's always a good king, or a good bank, or a good businessman, and these conclusions, while they pay lip service to progressive ideals, ultimately conclude that nothing of the status quo need be challenged, not really, which feels pretty convenient when the company producing these things own more and more of the media that we consume every day.
But now Disney will have full control of Hulu, will control its customer management, its technology, its data sharing.
This is not to say that empowering women to be leaders or a family keeping their house or cruelty-free circuses are a bad thing, but if that's all you got, then that's not progress, that's just marketing. These movies are redundant, with a couple of exceptions, weird outliers like Maleficent, and I guess you could make a case for The Jungle Book. But for the most part, these movies don't need to exist, so they give themselves a metatextual reason to exist in the text. It's that thing you like, but woke. For The Lion King, it's take the majestic thing and run it through this hyper-sterilized realism filter. For Beauty and the Beast, it's sending this love story about personal growth and forgiveness through the Beast for She filter. And for Aladdin, it's sending Princess Jasmine through the girlboss filter. And for Dumbo, it's take the problematic thing and deproblematizing it to the point where it's unrecognizable, and Dumbo isn't even the main character anymore.
Wow, this is a disaster.
Like, okay, so you've taken a property from the 1940s and you have identified that it has certain insensitivities relating to race and animal cruelty. You have declared the thing problematic. Yeah, great, good for you. In the words of Alan Arkin,
so?
And that's one of the more frustrating things about this era of pop criticism, where we look back on media history and be like, thing bad, and people can look on history with this smugness of hindsight and say, you know that thing you liked as a kid? Well, it had problems. It was problematic. Did I blow your mind yet? And it's like, okay.
So?
You've taken step one, you've identified the problem, what do you want to do with that? Are you that guy in that Onion article that always likes to bring up that John Lennon beat his wife? Do you want to drag the company that made the thing through the street? Do you want to wave it off and say it was a product of its time, so who cares? Or do you want to do what Disney is doing with its remakes and just erase the history and just ignore the stuff that aged poorly and just pretend it never happened?
Wow,
This is a disaster.
Because a part of media literacy is taking film history, understanding its context, exploring different viewpoints on the media and the history in question, and accepting it for what it was, not pretending it didn't happen. There are some power structures that Disney movies are never going to challenge. The original entries in the Disney film canon were never about challenge or change, and so it goes with their remakes and their reboots and their sequels. It's not the system that's bad, it's that women aren't allowed to be CEOs. Let Jasmine be a girl boss, Sultan. It's not that class stratification is bad, it's just Belle totally sticking it to those narrow-minded poor townies by owning a VC-funded washing machine startup. Only Maleficent, hot mess though it is, kind of feels a little transgressive and an outlier in this trend because it's actually centered on women and their pain, and actually challenges the foundation of the original in a way that you don't see in any of these other movies. And Maleficent's girl boss angle doesn't feel so hollow, since it ends with the ladies in power and we actually develop the originally very underdeveloped lead of Aurora in lieu of trying to correct anything in the original. It must needs be remarked that one of the big issues here, especially once Disney started dipping into the waters of making animated films with non-European settings or characters of color, is that people of color, or from the backgrounds of the people being depicted, were rarely involved in the behind-the-scenes work. With the live-action films, there could have been space to correct this, but Guy Ritchie is directing Aladdin, I guess. Was all of Bollywood busy? All of it? Again, gains made, but ultimately still minute compared to the sheer volume of content that Disney puts out, especially in the live-action department that is presently doing pretty well. Why the company wants to show that they recognize their problematic past with gender, but totally ignores its problematic history with race, is because it's really easy to make lean-in feminism profitable. After all, Disney princesses are girl bosses now.
Do people assume all your problems got solved because a big strong man showed up?
Yes, what is up with that?
Just like you will be one day. And this is why I find Disney wokeness highly cynical. They're more than happy to show how they've changed in some regards, but only the profitable ones. They have better race representation now, which is good, but they aren't about to admit that there was ever anything the company has to move beyond. Song of the South? That didn't happen. That's never getting a release. These parts of Dumbo? That didn't happen. What Makes the Red Man Red? We Are Siamese? Didn't happen. There's no like corporate-approved profitable way to make any metatextual examination of Disney's history with race representation, or lack thereof, profitable, so they don't. The insidious thing to me is that with Disney positioning itself to be the biggest media monopoly in history, the trend is less about meta-commentary, but priming people to be loyal to the company. After all, the company sees and hears your criticisms. It agrees with your ideals about inclusivity. So don't worry about the fact that they're well on their way to owning everything. They're here to support you being a girl boss.
Do you have daddy issues? I don't even have a mom.
Neither do we! And speaking of being a boss, babe, we need to pay the bills. Because we live in a society. So this episode was sponsored by Audible, and originally this episode was going to have way more to do with Disney in the 90s, but then it didn't. But I'm going to recommend Disney War on Audible to you anyway if you want to read about the supervillain rise and fall of Michael Eisner. Audible has the world's largest selection of audiobooks and audio entertainment, including Audible Originals. Audible members get more than ever before. Every month you can choose one audiobook regardless of price, as well as 2 Audible Originals from a fresh selection. Try saying that 10 times fast. Members stay motivated and inspired with unlimited access to exclusive guided fitness and meditation programs. Yes, I know I should do that. I don't have time. Audible members can easily exchange any title that they don't love at any time, and members keep their library of listens forever, even if they cancel. So start listening with a 30-day Audible trial today. Choose 1 audiobook and 2 Audible Originals absolutely free. Visit audible.com/Lindsay Ellis or text Lindsay Ellis to 500-500. That is audible.com/LINDSAYELLIS or text Lindsay Ellis to 500-500. Yes, I have to say this twice. Like it's the radio. And now I finally earned this. I don't even know what these things are called.